So we are going to talk today with Robin Lepre, who is the author of Doggy Do's and Don'ts, as told by Cadence the dog. And she is part of Casa Paws, and Casa is a long time. Casa Transport is a longtime partner of ours. So we are really excited to work with them on this. And this is to talk about a new grant program that we are starting called InstaEducate to teach children responsible pet ownership. And it's a brainchild of Robin. So we want to talk a little bit today about why she did this and what brought it about, and then how you actually do it so that some of our shelter partners might choose to apply for this grant so that they can do it also. So, Robin, in a nutshell, tell us why you created this, why you wrote the book and created this program.
I have been volunteering at dog shelters since about 2017, and I have volunteered at several shelters in Middle Tennessee. And what I saw was that there were universal problems everywhere, no matter where we went. And it had to do with people not knowing that they should fix their pets, that they needed to have identification, that they shouldn't be roaming, and just basic care. And I just saw that people did not know a lot of these things. They were undereducated. And I realized that we had to go out into the communities and do some education because we weren't going to reach them on social media. They weren't following our Facebook pages. And so my initial plan was just to get some books and go to schools and read to kids about these, what I would consider the core topics. And the problem I found was I couldn't find the books I needed. There are really good books out there about bite prevention and safety and kindness towards animals, but I couldn't find books meant for early elementary age students that talked about spay neuter and microchips and all the other topics. So I finally just said I'm going to write this book. And so that's what I did was I wrote a book, and I had a great illustrator who was one of Isabella Orozco, is a kennel technician at one of the shelters, and she did the pictures. And so my initial plan was just to go and take this book and read it to a few different schools. What happened was that when I went to the very first school and I brought my book and I sat down, is that they put it up using a document camera up on a big screen. And then I realized, oh, you can read this on a big screen. And that's how things are usually done now, a lot different than when I was in elementary school. And the second or third school we went to said, well, can you read it to the entire school? And then I really saw, oh, we can do this at a much bigger scale. And so I created PDFs of the book that we wrote. And using a PDF file, you can display it on a great big screen. And I started to read to one grade at a time. And that was a very effective way to reach a lot of people in the community. And so that's what we've been doing.
That's super cool. So, what's your goal for a kid who comes and sits down and watches one of your programs? What's the goal?
Yeah, so we talk to a lot of different kids. So we talk all the way from pre-K all the way up to eighth grade. And so the goal for me is for them to know more than they started because they're all coming at this from different perspectives and different backgrounds. And so it's different for every child. And so I want them to take away information that they didn't know and information that will be useful for them going forward and for their families going forward.
So, what are some of the tough topics that you hit on? Because I know your book hits on some stuff that we tend to tiptoe around when we're talking to children because we think they can't handle it. So, what are some of those topics when it comes to responsible pet ownership that you hit on hard in this book?
There's sort of two things in that. One is we talk about everything. So we'll talk about spay neuter, we'll talk about microchips, we talk about chaining because I don't really love dogs being on chains all the time. We talk about adequate shelter. The thing that has proven for me to be probably the most challenging is the notion of keeping your dog contained on your property. Because when I wrote the book, it sounded really simple, right? Just, a fence is great. The problem is that when you get into rural counties, most people don't have fences, and you can't just say, oh, go build a fence. And so that is a hard topic because I want to give kids good practical advice recognizing the fact that every family is not going to have a fence. And so we talk about different solutions. I mean, walking a dog obviously is a great solution, but I've come around to different forms of like if you have to have your dog on a tether or a line for a part of the day, if that keeps your dog from running off and getting hit by a car or getting lost, then I've come around to that because that's better than the alternative. And so these are hard conversations because you're having them with kids and they're not the ones who are going to make these decisions, but I want them to have knowledge so that going forward they make good decisions.
Yeah. So walk us through what a program looks like. So you arrive at the elementary school, and then what happens?
Yeah, so like I said, typically it's a grade by grade presentation. I always start by just introducing myself. I tell them that this is a book about, in this case, dogs. And I'll ask, how many of you have dogs? And usually the answer is about 80% of hands will go up. That's roughly. And then I'll ask kids, raise your hand if you visit friends or you have family with a dog. And then, all the other hands go up. And then I'll say, raise your hand if there are dogs in your neighborhood. And then all hands are up. And so I use that to make the point that this is an important book if you have a dog, because I want to teach you how to take care of them. But even if you don't have a dog, this is still important because dogs are everywhere in our lives. And so it's important that we all learn something to keep ourselves safe. The other thing I also mention is that there are always going to be some kids that are afraid of dogs. My daughter Anna was very, very afraid of dogs when she was younger. And so I tell kids if that sounds like you or someone like hopefully when you learn more about dogs, you'll feel safer and more comfortable. And I think that's an important message too.
Yeah. What so this is very much an interactive program, right? You're reading through the book and you're talking to them about each thing, and I'm assuming being elementary children, they have a lot to say.
Yeah, so the book, we read through it page by page, but we stop after each page and we take questions, we ask them questions, they share stories. So it starts off with the basics of all dogs need food and water. And so we'll ask, do any of you help out at home? Do you get your dogs food? Do you get them water? We talk about the importance of dogs that are outside and why we have to go out frequently and check on their water because the bucket can get knocked over, the sun can dry it up, or if it's frozen, they can't drink frozen water. So we go through each topic, and kids will tell lots of stories about how they help or things that they've noticed. And we go from there to shelter and then identification and so on.
I'm sure you get some funny questions because kids can ask funny questions. What are some of the funny things that they ask you or challenge you on?
The thing that I've been most taken by is their interest in worms because we do talk about heartworms and kids can really relate to that because they've all had mosquito bites and so that they'll have questions, how do you know if your dog has heartworms? And one girl in second grade asked if heartworms were fatal, and I didn't know second graders knew that word. So I've just been so impressed. And then one child asked, do the heartworms affect the mosquitoes? And so I had to look that up, and the answer is yes. It does shorten the lifespan just shortly, just a little bit for mosquitoes too. So I learned things too, and kids always impress me with their level of questions.
What are some of the hard stories? I'm sure you hear some hard ones too. What are some of the hard things that kids share with you?
Um, well, kids have seen dogs on chains and they will tell me a story about one boy said his dog was on a chain and got stuck in the fence and that they found him dead like that because he couldn't get out and couldn't get to water. And that's sad, right? Um, Another boy told me a story about dogs getting onto his property and going after his own dog. So his father took out a gun and shot both of the dogs. That's traumatic. It shows you these kids are not completely innocent. They have seen a lot. And so we have to give them credit for that. And we have to make sure that our conversations measure up to that and not keep it so naive when they're actually seeing much more than we realize.
Yeah. we're going to offer this as an opportunity for shelters and rescues to take this program and do it themselves in a school. So, how do you envision that happening, and like what can you say to like encourage them to want to do it, because you've had experience doing it and you've learned along the way. I'm sure you've grown a lot from it, and I'm sure it's changed from when you started. But so if we give this program to a school, they're going to a school to a shelter, they're going to get PDFs, they're going to get a script, they're going to get copies of the book, um, and from there, what's your advice? Where do they go from there?
Yeah, I would just approach one school at a time. I don't get an automatic yes every time. So I write a bunch, I reach out, and if someone expresses interest, I just accommodate whatever they want. If they want a 40-minute talk, we'll do that. If they want 30, I'll do 30. I keep it positive. I keep the conversations just very hopeful, and I make the kids feel good about it, even if they're explaining a difficult situation that they're in at home. We don't want to shame people or shame parents. We want to plant seeds for how they might do this differently. And because I want everyone to feel good about our conversations, the kids, I want them to go home and tell their parents. And so I would say I would keep the messaging positive and just really supportive. I thank every child for every story, no matter how difficult it is. Thank you for sharing that because that's so important for them to be heard.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really, really awesome that you did this. Think it's going to be a very useful tool. I think people don't even realize how much they need this, but they need this, and how it can have a big impact on their community and their animal shelter population. So, what's one thing that you hope comes from this?
I think the biggest thing is that we need to do more prevention, and people are realizing that. I mean, that's why people have really jumped on spay neuter because that is such a great form of prevention. But we also have to remember that we have to reach the people that aren't hearing us otherwise. If they're not on your social media, they are not getting your messaging. And so we need to go into communities. And so my hope is that we broaden knowledge and education throughout the community and we don't just keep preaching to the choir of converts, is that we reach new people and give them information they had not heard, because that's how you're going to make widespread change is to reach the people that aren't fixing their pets and that their animals are roaming and that they don't know anything about microchipping, and let them know, because that's where you're going to affect the people that are probably contributing disproportionately to animal overpopulation.
Yeah. Have you heard anything from schools after you've had a visit of any kind of impact or response that they've gotten?
Yeah, we've had a great response. And so after every presentation, we give the organizer at the school a survey. And so we ask them, did the students grasp the material? Did they understand it? And we get all good feedback. And then what's been personally fun for me is when these schools share their visits on their own social media, because then you'll see a lot of parents commenting and saying, this is my favorite, my child's favorite of the year, or my kid talked about this all day. And so we aren't seeing complaints. We're seeing a lot of really good feedback from the community.
That's awesome. So you guys are having a big impact already, but it would be really awesome if we could multiply that impact by putting this program in place other places. So if you're a shelter or rescue who's a partner of ours right now, you're eligible for an InstaEducate grant so that you can bring this program to your community. But if you're not currently a shelter or rescue partner of ours, you can reach out directly to Robin, I'm sure, and at Casa Paz and Casa Transport, and talk to her about how you can get this program for your community too. So if you want to reach out to us, you're going to reach out to Patty at wwldo.org if you are one of our shelter partners. And if they want to reach out to you, Robin, how do they do that?
They can email me directly at Robin, it's with an I, Robin, at casatransport.org. And I'm happy to answer questions and talk people through how we go about doing it.
Yeah, and that was one thing too I wanted meant to hit on, is that when we give this program to a shelter say in another state, you're still available, right? You're still
Oh,
available to
yeah.
help them, to coach them, to answer questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to.
Good. Yeah. So super awesome. Really excited about this. Excited to see where this goes and hope that many of you take us up on this offer.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.